What's up, home diggity dogs? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a hypertrophy focused Q&A, and let's jump right into it with question number 23. Can you compare your weight/height to natural hypertrophies and talk about what you see as the major differences? Also, what's your best guess as to how much less you'd weigh holding your training constant for every inch shorter you were? Like, what would you guess you'd weigh if you were 5'10" instead? So I'm 6 feet tall. I think NH is also 6 feet tall, and I think our overall levels of lean body mass are probably pretty similar. I think he's been bulking. Yeah, I know he was like 210 to 215-ish for a while, but now he might be a little bit heavier. I'm also a little bit heavier because I've been, bulking up since the cut, and so I think we're probably both in that 215 to 220 range. And our body fat percentage is probably fairly similar as well. And if you look at our measurements, they're also pretty similar. I think our arms are probably within about a half an inch of each other. Also legs within about a half an inch of each other. I don't know his chest measurement. Mine's around 48, 47-ish at the moment. So usually if you get two guys roughly the same height and weight and body fat percentage, you're going to see fairly similar measurements as well. Now, as for how much weight you lose per inch of height, I think I heard 7 pounds per inch of height, which sounds pretty reasonable. It probably scales based on muscularity. So like IFBB pros, maybe it's like 10 pounds per inch of height, or maybe even more. So, but that seems to be a pretty good rule of thumb, somewhere in that 5 to 10-ish amount of pounds per height. All right, question number 22. How do you apply progressive overload on smaller exercises like lateral raises, or just go by feel? So as you get more advanced in particular, the rate of progression is going to be so slow that you might not even add a rep per session. So, let's say on a lateral raise, over the course of a year, I might add 2.5 kilos. So maybe I go from like 15 kilos to 17.5 kilos per hand. And that's actually pretty ambitious. That might actually be a few years of progression, assuming the same technique. And then even if you're using a double progression, let's say 10 to 15 reps or 15 to 20, maybe 20 to 30 or something like that, yeah, that might add up to like 1 rep per session or maybe even less, So this is where you have to be able to be okay with repeating performance. And you have to realize you're playing a long game. Progress is going to be slow. And, this is where actually I kind of just scrap that entirely. So I just do a number of sets that I want to do, and I might not even count the reps, right? Because sometimes chasing that progression actually gets you less out of the movement, right? So you want to get more reps, you want to get higher weight, you want to really drive progression. But on these isolations that are very cheatable, it's very easy to end up cheating more and more and more and getting less and less and less out of the movement. So on something, like an adductor machine, I've already maxed out the machine for 20 reps, right? And so now I'm focused just on what I'm doing on, getting a good squeeze, performing the movement correctly, because driving progression is, kind of out the window. I guess I could get a gym pin or add weight some other way, but for now, for a lot of movements, I'm really just focused on what I'm doing rather than progressive overload. Now, on most movements, the big compound movements, I do think that tracking is very important, and most people should track their weights, especially beginners, where you should be seeing that consistent progress. Question 21, do you think having a shoulder day in a bro split is viable, or would you just throw shoulders into one of the other days, like an arm day or a chest day? Love the videos. Thank you. So I don't see the point in a shoulder day. What do you do? Like 2 presses, a few laterals, a few rear delt movements, and then a front delt movement, which for most people is going to be, kind of superfluous. I don't see the point. I would say that's kind of a waste of a day, right? Like, just take a rest day if you need rest, or if you're going to be training your shoulders, you might as well train the pectorals as well, or the back, which also you can train very frequently, or the arms. Like, there's just not much point in having a shoulder day for most people. All right, question 20. Does training frequency matter Or is it just about weekly volume and intensity? It matters. So you might see a meta-analysis where they take a whole bunch of studies that are on a whole bunch of people and they conclude that only training volume matters or only proximity to failure matters and the exact frequency that you use doesn't matter. But I think a lot of these individual differences, they kind of get washed out in the sea of people. And so for some people, lower frequency is better. For some people, higher frequency is better. For some people, moderate frequency is better. And it's also going to vary based on the exercises that you do. Whenever you go to the gym and you work something, you're going to have a time course of recovery. So if I do a shitload of RDLs, that's probably a week. So low frequency would be better if I chose to do that much volume. Now, if I did just 2 sets of rear delt raises, it's not going to take a week to recover, right? It's probably going to take a day, So your frequency does matter and it is relevant. And I think it is mostly used as a way to distribute that volume. But in the extremes, they won't be the same. So if you're doing 1 set every single day versus 7 sets on 1 day, I don't see why those would be the same, because you also have to keep in mind the quality of each set is probably going to be different as well. All right, next question. Question number 19. Hey Geoff, I'm well aware that you can't spot reduce fat loss, but do you think there's anything that can be done for changing fat distribution? Love the content. Edit, any merit to the bro science idea of targeting an area with strength training? I've noticed it myself, feeling that the muscle is more spread out. So I'm not sure what you mean by that last part. If you train an area, it's going to grow, and so it's going to look more spread out. So this is often, I guess, why someone who has more muscle looks leaner at a certain body fat percentage. And so sometimes I'll post a picture of myself and say, I'm 18% body fat, and people will be like, no, I must be 28% body fat. Whereas it's just because I have a decent amount of mass on that ass, which spreads everything out, and you can look better and more aesthetic at a certain body fat percentage. Now, in terms of body fat distribution, a lot of this is lifestyle. When I see someone, I get a client questionnaire, and they have like this big pot belly, I scroll down and like 9 times out of 10 they're drinker. They have that. And so you hear beer belly, that's a thing, So certain choices that you make, they can impact where the fat actually goes. And I think that especially having visceral fat can be a symptom of bad sleep, high cortisol for whatever reason, drinking, etc. And so, your choices matter. However, I would also hesitate to give any kind of actionable plan to reduce fat in an area, because most of the time it's just reducing the overall amount of fat that you are holding. And so if someone gives you a belly fat loss plan, it's not going to look any different than just a normal fat loss plan. And most of the time that's just marketing. You hear the old Poliquin biosignature classes or whatever, where he would say if you have fat in this area, or fat in this area, or fat in this area, it's your thyroid, or it's your kidneys, or it's your hypothalamus. That's the issue. And so you need to take these herbs that I'm going to be selling you in order to reduce that fat. Also, here's this diet which is lower in calories, and then people lose fat everywhere, including that area, and they think it's these herbs or spices. And so you have to be careful of people selling you bullshit based on reducing your fat here or there or anywhere. By the way, this video is sponsored by Boostcamp. So they are an app where you can log your progress and also gives you access to some of the best programs on the internet. Alexander Bromley, Alberto Nunez, Bald Omni-Man has a program up there. I will have a 3rd program up there in the near future, which might turn some heads, might cause some waves and disrupt some people in the fitness industry. We'll see. And so definitely check them out. I will leave a link in the description. So thank you to Boostcamp for sponsoring this video. All right, question number 18. On average, from what you've seen with yourself and clients, how long does it take to see results from your training? I've heard that you get stronger and stronger, then you see muscle, rinse and repeat. Also, congrats on 125K, thank you. And as a long-term subscriber, I want more end-of-video rap songs about being jack stacked and yiggity yak to the max, LOL. I'll do my best. We'll see if the end of voiceover raps return. We'll see. Now, as for how long it takes to see results, it does vary a lot, and I never promise results, right? Because you don't know. You don't necessarily know. Part of it is on you with the plan, part of it is on them with the execution. But then also there's a lot of other factors. Stress, genetics certainly are a factor. I mean, there are some people who I've been startled by their progress, like very, very fast, very, very dramatic changes. And, to say that genetics don't play a role there, I think is a little bit naive and deceptive. So, part of it is that. I would say it depends on your level of advancement as well. If I get a client who've been training for 15 years already, very, very consistently, it might take a year to see results. Whereas if someone is a beginner, you should see results fairly quickly, particularly with fat loss, and particularly if they're not super overweight already. If you're at 35% body fat, it's hard to actually see those changes immediately. But if you're, 18% body fat and your goal is fat loss, you should see the changes within a few weeks for sure. All right, question number 17. What is your opinion on full body training opposed to something like upper, lower, or push-pull legs for advanced lifters, as in 4+ years of training experience? Do you think they can be just as effective or potentially even more in some cases, or are they just an inferior version for people limited on time? So I think they're going to be pretty similar. And I think sometimes people put too much faith in a given split. Like, oh, I'm not making gains in upper lower. Full body is going to be way different, or push-pull legs is going to be way different. They might be a nice change of pace, but I wouldn't expect something drastically different, because in a lot of cases, the frequency of training is the same, the volume of training is the same, the exercises are the same, the technique is the same, the diet is the same, the sleep is the same. So you're really just changing how you distribute the volume and exercises through the week, and that can make a small difference. And when you're more advanced, maybe that small difference could be enough to put you from plateaued to making progress, but I wouldn't expect dramatically different results. All right, next question 16. Thoughts on purposefully creating a muscle imbalance, like training your rear delts and external rotator cuffs more, or training your neck flexion more than you do neck extension to get better posture. So why are you doing this? Is it for aesthetics, to look better? In that case, sure. Is it to prevent injury? The data on that is really not very strong at all. Way, way, way less airtight than a lot of channels would suggest. Posture videos do well. They do really well with the normies, but to me it's not really particularly important. I would say a lot of this is going to be habitual. So if you get stronger rear delts, it's not like they automatically, make you sit upright and in quote-unquote better posture, which I think is actually a silly saying anyway. Like, why is this posture worse? Like, is it causing pain? No, so it's fine. I mean, I actually really like the saying that the best posture is the next one. So as long as you're moving, that's probably going to be more important than if you have a stick up your ass, making your spine stay really, really extended. Like, is this good posture? No, it fucking hurts. So I guess feel free. I mean, it's not like rear delts are easy to overtrain, and I think most people have those areas undertrained anyway, so feel free, but I don't think there's going to be any particular benefit. All right, question 15. What are your muscle maintenance tips for someone over 50 with a long training history? Explanation: as someone over 50, I find almost all training advice given by people who are experts but under 35 unintentionally hilarious. I want to see how you do. So I am under 35, barely. I'm 34. I do have experience with people who are over 50. If you're just maintaining, I would be more risk averse, right? Like, so don't max out, don't put yourself in weird positions. You can do quote unquote bulletproofing exercises that can maybe help, but build up to those very, very gradually. And I would say you need to be a little bit more risk averse with your training, particularly if you're not trying to make gains, right? Like, maintaining is relatively easier, and so therefore, why take the risk with like super high volume or really aggressive progressions, etc. So, just sort of, you know what you have done to build that muscle if you have a long training history. So basically just do more of the same, but a little bit less. Listen to your body, maybe take a little bit longer to recover if you need it, and don't do anything extreme. All right, question 14. Any advice for bodybuilding while working extremely physically demanding jobs, such as constantly pulling heavy objects from the floor, sledgehammering, shoveling, extremely high step count? I understand you'd want to reduce the volume of movements in the same line of specificity like deadlifts, but any idea on joint stress, general fatigue, and volume intensity frequency goals? P.S. Taking a shower directly after work and after the gym every day sucks. Yeah, I've been there, and especially if it's hot weather, you're going to have to shower a few times a day, most likely. I would say volume reduction is probably better than reducing the intensity. I mean, you're already getting a good volume of general work, so you probably don't have to do much to increase your work capacity. Cardio, like formal cardio, can probably be a bit of an afterthought, assuming this activity has at least some level of intensity. And so I would give yourself lower volume and also a volume range, because some days are going to be better or worse than others, and you might notice that you're maybe not as consistent with how you feel. But I would say also don't baby yourself. I have a few clients who have very, very demanding jobs, and they can still do well. If anything, it is perhaps a source of recovery. It might not feel like it. You're going to have, you're going to feel tired, but you're also in some way recovering when you're doing that activity. It might not feel like it, but having at least a decent level of activity versus being totally sedentary is going to be better. So it kind of depends on where you are on that curve. So way too much activity will hurt your recovery. No activity will hurt your recovery. And so you might be somewhere different on that curve every single day, every single week. And so having maybe a little bit lower volume and then some volume flexibility is probably a good idea. Also, depending on when you work out, caffeine might be a decent option, but I wouldn't take that in if it's too late in the day. Do you think obsessing over body weight matters? What I mean is people often compare themselves with a person with a similar height and think that if the person looks jacked at 90 kilos and I'm the same height as him and I'm 70, I'll have to put on 20 kilos to look like him. Do you think this is a healthy comparison to make, or will it be better to focus on progression rather than weight gain? So everyone is going to look a bit different at the same height and the same weight. I get guys who they're the same height as me, the same weight, and even sometimes the same level of strength, roughly, and they're like, well, why don't I look like you? Well, in a word, genetics, right? Like having the right muscle insertions, the right muscle bellies, they do make a difference in terms of aesthetics. I've seen some really good bodybuilders who are astonishingly light because they just have those, I think Alberto Nunez says, the muscle bellies took the long way around. So basically, you have these arms where it's like, I guess I'll go, we take a detour, and it's like that kind of shit. Like I have the sweepy triceps, but I don't really have like those biceps, the NH biceps that, and this can be trained as well. Gaining muscle will make the muscles look more bubbly, but I also think genetics are certainly a factor here. And so I wouldn't focus too much on weight either, because if you try to gain too aggressively, you're going to gain a lot of fat, which will reduce your definition even more, which will make you look even worse. And, it's probably not going to end well. So I would focus on progression and maybe weight gain depending on your body fat percentage and how far away you are from your goals. But generally comparison, especially with aesthetics and how someone looks, is not the best for your mental health. Like when I get a client and their questionnaires and their goal is like, I want to look like you. I mean, that's not, I don't have the secret to make you look exactly like me, right? Like I can give you some advice to help you get to the best version of yourself, as cliche as that is. But, I don't have the secret to make you look exactly the same as me. All right, next question. Are there any benefits or drawbacks of alternating in two splits? 1 week is lower upper arms, and the next week is high intensity or high frequency full body in a repeated 2-week routine. Would you reap the benefits of focusing on certain muscle groups during the first week and then reap the benefits of high frequency during the second week? Or would this be worse than sticking to one? So often people, when trying to do this kind of stuff or manipulating their training, they tend to only look at the good things, like what could go right, without thinking about what could go wrong. I would say those benefits and drawbacks would probably cancel each other out and result in something that is just okay, right? Like it's probably not any better, but maybe not any worse. Yeah, I would try it, see if it works for you, but I wouldn't expect anything magical. All right, next question. Damn, the channel is growing even faster than your arms. Congrats, Jeffrey. Thank you. Actually, my arms are on maintenance because I'm focusing more on the chest and the back as well as the legs. So yeah, they're not really growing at all, and the channel is also it's chugging along. So yeah, when you're more advanced, you can't necessarily focus on everything at the same time, and so they're kind of just on the back burner. All right, next question. Hi Geoff, love the videos, and 125K is well deserved. Thank you. I've heard you talk about muscular growth spurts, and I think I am actually experiencing one right now. Nice. What do you think are the most important reasons for this happening for you? For example, for me, my sleep and recovery have been far from perfect, but focusing on my diet has been the most noticeable change. Thanks for the natty inspiration. I'm excited to see how much further you can push. Thank you. So I would say for me, sleep is a big one, and I think that's one of the reasons why it took a while to recover from the diet, because the last 2 weeks, it was like 3 hours a night, 4 hours a night, 3 hours a night, 5 hours a night, 4 hours a night. And usually when I'm like at maintenance or bulking or whatever, I can notice the difference between like 7 hours and 8 hours or 8 hours and 9 hours. And often my body wants 9 or 10 hours. And so I need a lot of sleep. And if I miss even an hour, I definitely feel it. So when I was getting 3 hours a night, I mean, yeah, it just messes you up. And I think it takes a little while to recover from the diet. So there's a delay between any stimulus your body encounters or feels, and then the result from that and the recovery from that. So it took me like a month to get my sleep back to somewhat normal, and then probably 2 months until I felt like training was going really well. So for me, sleep is big. Diet is not that important compared to sleep. If my diet is not good but my sleep is good, things go well. If my diet is perfect but my sleep is not good, it just doesn't. All right, question number 9. Hey Jeffrey, so I'm someone who has counted calories before, but similarly to you, I realized I was becoming too obsessive, so I've been trying eating intuitively. I've seen your videos on the topic, and I've been seeing progress on my lifts without counting calories, although my weight has increased, which is what I'm trying to do. Could you share some tips to building muscle while eating intuitively, if there's something new you've learned about since the making of that video? So I would say that weighing yourself is going to be very, very important, just because if you're not measuring the input, you want to measure the output, which is a lot easier to do. It's not particularly tough to just step on the scale and then write down a number. And so I would definitely do that, but it sounds like you're already doing that. And if your appetite isn't in the place that it needs to be, you can slide somewhere different on the scale of overall food calorie density. So if you're having trouble getting in enough calories, you can increase the density of the calories that you're eating in order to just sort of subconsciously eat more. Same thing with dieting down. If you're trying to lose weight but you're not losing weight and you're eating intuitively, add in some vegetables. Even if you're not counting them, you're going to feel fuller and you're going to intake fewer calories. And I was able to get pretty damn peeled without counting at all. Same thing with bulking. I could basically manipulate my body weight up or down and my body fat percentage up or down based on exercise or based on food selection rather than counting anything. So I would maybe change exactly how you structure your diet. If you're not eating that much in the morning, if you're doing some kind of intermittent fasting thing, I would get in more calories earlier. Again, even if you don't count them, they certainly count. Most people have a few muscle groups that respond well to training. Do you think that the muscles that are lacking are just trained incorrectly and could hang with the bigger muscles if trained adequately or even past them? Parentheses, if you have a juicy muscle, can you bring your whole body to that level and become juicy? I love you. All right. Thank you. Maybe. So what often happens is that the strong muscle groups are strong, so your body uses them, especially in compound movements. For example, my chest, definitely a weak point compared to, the triceps, as well as compared to the delts. And so for a lot of chest movements, if it's a push, my triceps take over. If it's like a fly or something, I have to be really, really mindful of keeping the tension on the chest rather than like the front delts. And as you get that muscle stronger, your body will recruit it more easily because it's stronger, and then you can train it more effectively with a wider range of exercises. So for me, the close grip bench press used to be like exclusively triceps. I mean, obviously there's a bit of chest and front delt because, you can use more weight on a close grip bench press than a skull crusher, but like very little chest involvement on a close grip bench press. But after doing like a lot of chest isolations, higher reps, very controlled, very focused, I can actually feel my chest working on a close grip bench press. So sometimes you have to take a step back from these compound movements, particularly when heavy, right? Because if you're doing a set of 5, you can't really think, you can't really focus. You're just trying to get the weight up. And so, you're going to recruit the areas that are the strongest, that are the most efficient, and, the areas that you want to train might be undertrained, and they will sort of have this downward spiral of being chronically undertrained. Now, as can they get, to be a strong point? We'll see. I mean, my back is getting pretty decent, and, for a long, long time, it was a lagging group, where I would do neutral grip pull-ups, and I would basically just be doing like a standing, somewhat back rear delt assisted neutral grip curl or something like that. And so a lot of it is reducing the weight and then focusing on what you're doing and then just giving it time and being patient, because the weak areas, they might take a few years to build up. Question number 7, whenever I don't lift for 3 to 7 days, I am always stronger than before, even on movements which recruit muscles that never get sore for me. Example of side delts. Does this mean I'm overtraining? Whoa, bro! You can't just throw around the word overtraining like it's a fucking frisbee. You might say overdoing it or doing too much, but overtraining is like when you're seriously messed up.
Now that's fucked up.
Usually it doesn't even happen from lifting. It only really happens from endurance training or CrossFit or combining lifting and something else. Maybe to some people who are doing very, very high volumes, it might happen. But generally speaking, if you're not progressing, it doesn't mean you're overtraining. It just means that you've plateaued. I would say, first of all, do you take 3 to 7 days off often? In that case, I would say no. I mean, if you're taking 3 to 7 days off every single month, that's maybe a structural problem with your training.
Wow, I wonder what's next for me.
You peaked.
What?
You peaked.
You're kidding!
Yeah, maybe this means you are overdoing it. I don't know the overall structure of your training at all based on this, but sure, if you take time off and you're always stronger, that might mean that you should take more days off more frequently, because you're going like this, and then boom, maybe you could get more frequent bursts of growth. All right, next question. I enjoy the content, GVS. Glad to hear it. Question, how often do you use advanced techniques like drop sets, mechanical drop sets, rest pause, and partials to go beyond failure with respect to arm training? I don't use drop sets often, but occasionally I do. Mechanical drop sets, you could say cheat reps are mechanical drop sets in a way. I do those fairly frequently. I mean, almost every set in a lot of exercises. Rest pause, I don't do rest pause formally very much anymore, but if I want to get 20 reps on a set, like I know that's going to be a reasonable effort, and I get to 16, maybe I'll take a few breaths so that I can get to 20, right? But I don't necessarily count it in my training log like, 16 plus 4, or 12 plus 6 plus 3, or something like that. I don't necessarily write it down. For me, on a lot of these isolations, they're more by feel than they used to be. I would say my number one piece of advice for most people would be make sure that you can genuinely go near failure and then to failure before you start going beyond failure, because it's very easy to use these techniques to avoid failure. And even now, I have to constantly audit myself to make sure, like, oh, did I do that drop set? Like, was I actually going to failure before that drop set? Because you'll see this all the time, where people, oh yeah, I'm doing drop sets, bro. And then you look at their initial set, and there was no bar speed slowdown. It looked pretty easy, and then they drop the weight, and you're just like, well, that's why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. Often enhanced lifters, by the way, like they use a lot of these advanced techniques, and they are nowhere near failure at any point. They're grunting and the groaning, and maybe they have lactic acid because of the gear or whatever. But that's something that is definitely not going to be productive if you're natural. So I would say first get the failure thing down, and then maybe you can add in advanced techniques. And so start with failure. All right, next question. How do you measure your progression when you include partials? It's a good add-on to the last question. It would be useful to see a vid of one of your sets on pushdowns, for example, what you wrote in your logbook, and how you try to beat it the following session. Thanks for all the great content. Love your videos. Oh, thank you. It varies based on the exercise. So on some movements, like a chest-supported row, I might count all of the reps that I do, even the partials. So I don't even write down, oh, I think I hit full range of motion and then partials beyond this. Like maybe rep 8 was the last full range of motion. I don't bother with any of that shit. It's just too hard to think about all that stuff during the set, right? You can't be thinking during a set. You need to be feeling, you need to be putting in effort. But man, if maybe I just lack the intellectual capabilities to be like, well, I think I missed that last millimeter of progression on the range of motion on rep 9, and whip out your protractor and like, rep 10 was this much, rep 11 was this. No, like, you can go down that rabbit hole and it's just a waste of fucking time. So I count all the reps that I do. Yes, this does mean that every set is going to be a little bit different. Not every set is as far beyond failure. And, I might write down in my log, like, 3 by 12 on chest-supported rows, and the first set was a couple reps beyond failure. The second set was like 4 or 5 reps beyond failure. And the last set, I failed halfway through. And then, the last reps, I'm like barely getting a little bit of range of motion. And so I think most people, when they see 3 by 12 in the log, they think like, oh yeah, maybe he only went to failure in the last set. Well, they were all beyond failure, right? So I don't track it as much as I used to, because I actually found that tracking it was not productive and was actually counterproductive. On other movements, I will count the full range of motion reps, and then I'll keep going, but I won't count those at all. And so it just varies based on the movement. I don't necessarily have a great explanation for why I do that on some movements and not on others. Maybe because on some movements, there's more of a gradual falling off of range of motion. On other ones, you can feel exactly when you miss full range of motion, and then you drastically reduce the range of motion from that point, and you can feel exactly where that point of failure was. All right, question number 4. We all know muscle soreness shouldn't be a main gauge of a good workout, and yet how do you use it as a tool to assess how well you worked the target muscle and the amount of volume directed to it, and how would you recommend using it? So I would say the most useful way to use soreness would be what area you worked. So if you're doing bench presses and then a couple days later, man, my front delt, really, really tender.
My tenders.
And you feel nothing in your chest, well, it's not like you worked your chest more than your front delt, right? Like, what gets sore is probably what got worked, even down to which area of the muscle, right? Like if you do bench presses and your lower chest is really sore and your upper chest doesn't feel anything, well, that's a pretty good indicator of what part of the muscle got worked. And I would say this probably is even down to not just what part of the muscle, like a fan-shaped muscle, like upper versus lower, but along the muscle fiber, right? So some movements make my quads sore up near my hips, other ones make them sore down near my knees. And so, we do know that muscle growth can occur, distally or proximally, and, therefore it can be perhaps an indicator of where muscle is actually going to be growing. I would say soreness is also most useful in the extreme. If you're so sore that you can't walk after a leg day, maybe it was a little bit too much, right? You know, kind of obvious, right? If you're not sore at all, ever, that might be an indicator as well that you can increase your volume, especially if there's other factors like you feel totally fresh, you know, maybe you're not progressing and you feel like you could do more, you're chomping at the bit, you're never getting sore. Okay, right, like that's something that could be used in conjunction with other indicators. If you're getting slightly sore some of the time, like you're probably in a pretty good place, but it's only really going to be useful at the extremes in my opinion. You can use it to a certain extent, but I wouldn't take the opinion of, oh, I didn't get sore, therefore it didn't do anything. Due to the repeated bout of fact, I often don't get sore. Right? I'll get comments like, oh, bro, you must have been sore for a week after that. I'm like, no, like, slightly sore? Like, I never get more than mildly sore because I'm not doing new movements. I train fairly high volumes, but I always train fairly high volumes, right? Like, I've done more volume in the past. So, you know, what I do now gets me slightly sore, but nothing crazy. And I think that's probably where you want to be. But if you have no soreness, that might also be fine if you're able to progress, if you're able to, you know, recover for the next session, etc. I would go based on those rather than soreness. But it could be useful in those extremes. All right, question number 3. Have you started incorporating lengthened partials in your training? If so, how do you find them? And do you think it's worth slowing down the entire portion of the eccentric or just the bottom half? So that last part would depend on the movement. I would say it's especially important to slow the movement down into that very lengthened position, especially with some muscle groups. So pecs, biceps are going to be more at risk for, you know, a muscle pull or muscle tear or tweak or something compared to, you know, traps and rear delts. Who the fuck tears your rear delt? I mean, if you tear your rear delt, you know, turn in your manhood card, I guess, because that just doesn't happen very often. In reality, my apologies to anyone who's torn their rear delt. You're not less of a man, right? So if I'm doing a dumbbell bench press, it's pretty even on the tempo on the way down, but yeah, I'm particularly cautious about that bottom position. Same thing if I was doing a preacher curl, which I don't really do them that often, but if you do them, yeah, I would be careful about that lengthened position. In fact, I might not even go all the way down, right, just because it's needlessly risky, and I don't think you're getting much muscle growth from like a really fully locked elbow. Also, hamstrings, I would be a little bit cautious with. You know, I've tweaked my hamstring at the bottom of an RDL or good morning. And so know yourself, know your injury history if you have one. And yeah, I would slow down in particular that bottom half, and perhaps even pause at that fully lengthened position. And yeah, I really like lengthened partials. I do them on most rowing movements, as I talked about before, where I go to failure and then I just keep going. I don't think I've done any movements where I do exclusively the lengthened position, right? Where it's like I'm doing a cable row and it's only this part for the whole time. No, I get full range of motion, and then as I fail, I get less and less of the range of motion. I've done them on leg presses. Brutal. Ugh, freaking going to 0 reps in reserve or as close as you can, and then just doing these baby little reps in the bottom part of the range of motion. Holy shit. I've seen Milo Wolf do them on squats. I've seen Alberto Nunez do them on RDLs. Yeah, they're tough. They're brutal. The data's there. I would give them a shot if you're more advanced and you know how to keep your form. So if you know how to keep everything braced and locked in on squats, probably okay. You might need some time to get used to like the differences in bracing. I've tried them out. It's a different feeling than going all the way up and all the way down. It's like you never really get a chance to rebreathe. And so, you know, your face just gradually fills with blood during the set. And so, you know, they're tough. As for like, have I seen growth from them? I think so, but at this point it's a little bit hard to measure. And so, yeah, give them a shot. All right, question 2, which is not really a question. Crazy how GVS gets all these paragraph-long questions in his comments compared to other fitness channels. Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with these Q&As, with the quality of the questions and just the depth and the nuance. It's not just like, bro, how do I grow my chest? Like top 3 chest exercises. No, like there's actually, detail and nuance and consideration, and they're all often generally applicable as well. So it's not like, I'm allergic to bagels. What should I eat instead, or some dumb shit. Like, so yeah, I'm really happy with the community, and you smart. You smart. Even if you didn't ask a question, good job, because you're watching this video. So yeah, pat yourself on the back. I can't because I lack the mobility. Like I can pat myself on the shoulder. There we go. All right, question number 1, a mental health question for you. Have you ever suffered from body dysmorphia, whether from your running days to now or sometime in between? A more pertinent question is, how do you deal with negative thoughts or emotions associated with your appearance/performance? Remember subscribing at 25K thinking this guy deserves to blow up, and look you now. Congrats, you blew up in size and in subs. Well, thank you. So let's tackle this, I guess, from the beginning. Have I ever suffered from body dysmorphia? Not really. I've seen some cases which are way, way worse than mine, where someone is like, has it really, really bad. And I would say, a lot of the time social media is to blame for this. Often when people go to gyms where there are a lot of enhanced lifters and, it makes them feel inadequate, I'm the biggest motherfucker around. Like, I don't actually know, there is this one guy in my gym who is certainly enhanced. And it's a weird feeling because usually I'm the biggest, king of the jungle or whatever. And, now there's someone who's significantly bigger. But I would say just focus on yourself. Just everyone has their own path. And I know this is cliche, but, there are lots of people who are stronger than me. And, there are people who DM me on Instagram, trying to like challenge me to a lift off or something. And I mean, I'm 34 at this point. So, back when I was 24 or something, if I had been creating content and I was at the same point I am now, sure, maybe it would be easier to, to have me change my decision making based on peer pressure. But at this point, I just don't care. I enjoy training. I like doing what I'm doing. And so, I don't really compare myself to other people, especially not enhanced lifters. I think that's where I get people who have a goal of being an enhanced lifter. So their goal physique is someone who's clearly sauced. And I say to them, like, by the way, they're enhanced, right? You know that. And they're like, yeah, but like it's still just like a goal that I have. What are you talking about? And so sure, I don't bench press the most in the world or even close to it, or squat or deadlift or any of these other lifts. But I genuinely don't care. It's just not something that has value to me. It used to, but only because that was expected of me. It wasn't because it was something I actually wanted to do. It was a goal that was given to me from someone else, and, I don't think those are reasonable goals to have at all. And so often I'll get comments from people who are like, oh, you must be way happier now that you're jacked compared to as a runner, or like, you must be way more confident. No, like, it's kind of the same, right? Like, I think if you have other issues, and I'll do a whole video on this, sure, gaining muscle might help in some ways, but I think a lot of that is not necessarily the muscle, it's the process, right? Like, it's putting in the work, it's showing up, it's being disciplined, it's using lifting as a way to show that you can have a positive outcome with something, right? It's having that positive association between putting in the work and having some kind of positive outcome. And this is where when I see people use drugs, they skip that part entirely, or mostly. And so if you have something that you are insecure about, just trying to patch over that crack with a bit of muscle, maybe not the most effective strategy, right? Like, maybe you should deal with whatever issues you're dealing with directly rather than just trying to out-train them. Alright, that is all for this video. If you want to support the channel, you can grab copies of my books. I will leave a link in a pinned comment. They have been very well received. They are priced extremely reasonably. And so if you want a lot, like several 100,000 words worth of training information that will be very helpful for you on your fitness journey, you can check those out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. This whole Q&A, I wasn't wearing any pants.